If you've been putting money into the stock market week after week, wondering if it's really going to matter in the long run, I want to show you something that changed everything for me. 5 years ago, I started investing $200 every single week into QQQ, the NASDAQ 100 ETF. Not because I had some insider knowledge, not because I timed anything perfectly, but because I realized something most people miss. Your wealth doesn't come from what you earn. It comes from what you keep and what you let grow. And now, after just 5 years, I'm looking at retiring a full decade earlier than I ever thought possible. Before we dive into the numbers, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because I'm breaking down the real math, the actual mistakes I made, and the specific strategy that turned weekly deposits into life-changing wealth. Let's get into it. The reason I chose QQQ specifically wasn't random. I could have picked a broad market fund. I could have gone with dividend aristocrats or small cap value. But when I looked at the companies driving actual innovation, actual revenue growth, and actual market dominance, they were all sitting in the NASDAQ 100. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Tesla, Nvidia. These weren't speculative bets. These were companies with proven business models, massive cash flows, and products that people used every single day. QQQ gave me instant exposure to all of them without having to pick winners or worry about concentration risk in any single stock. And the performance spoke for itself. Over the past decade, QQQ has averaged around 18% annual returns. That's not a guarantee for the future, but it's a track record built on real earnings growth, not hype. Most people think that investing $200 a week sounds like a lot. And I get it. That's $800 a month. That's nearly $10,000 a year. For a lot of households, that feels impossible. But here's what I learned early on. You don't find that money by earning more first. You find it by treating your future self like a bill that has to get paid. I didn't wait until I had extra cash lying around. I automated the investment the same way I automated my rent, my utilities, and my car payment. Every Friday, $200 left my checking account and went straight into QQQ. Some weeks it hurt. Some weeks I had to say no to things I wanted. But every single week, that deposit happened. And that consistency, not the amount, is what made everything possible. Let me walk you through what actually happened year by year, because the early part doesn't look like much. In year 1, I contributed $10,400. That's 52 weeks at $200 each. The market was decent that year, not explosive, but steady. QQQ grew around 15%, and by the end of year 1, my account sat at roughly $11,700. I had made about $2,300 in gains. That felt good, but it didn't feel life-changing. It felt like I was running on a treadmill, working hard but not really getting anywhere. I kept going anyway because I knew the real magic wasn't in year 1. It was in what came after. Year 2 started the same way. Another $200 every Friday. Another $10,400 in contributions. But now something different was happening. The $11,700 I already had was working too. It was growing while I added more. QQQ had another strong year, up around 20%. By the end of year 2, my total account balance was about $2,800. I had contributed $2,800 total over 2 years, but the account was worth $7,700 more than what I put in. That gap, that difference between contributions and value, was starting to widen. And that's when I realized I wasn't just saving money, I was building a machine. Year 3 is when things started to feel real. Another $2,400 in weekly contributions brought my total deposits to $31,200. But the account wasn't at $31,200. It was at $51,000. I had crossed the $50,000 mark, and more than a third of that balance was pure growth. Market gains, reinvested dividends, and the compounding effect of having a larger base. The psychology of watching your account grow faster than you can contribute is hard to describe. It's like watching someone else add money to your account every month, except that someone is the market itself. I started checking my balance more often, not out of anxiety, but out of curiosity. I wanted to see how much the portfolio could grow on its own. Year 4 was a roller coaster. The market had a rough first half. Inflation fears, interest rate hikes, and a lot of volatility. There were weeks where I'd deposit my $200 and watch the account value drop by $2,000 in the same week. That's the part nobody talks about. Investing feels great when everything goes up. It feels brutal when you're adding money and the balance shrinks anyway. But I kept going. I kept depositing every Friday, and I kept reminding myself that lower prices meant I was buying more shares for the same $200. By the end of year 4, after contributing another $10,400, my total deposits were at $41,600. The account value was around $68,000. The market had recovered in the second half of the year, and QQQ finished up about 12%. I had weathered the storm, and the portfolio had grown by over $16,000 in a single year. Year 5 was the breakout. Another $2,400 in contributions brought my total invested to $52,000. But the account didn't just inch forward, it exploded. QQQ had one of its strongest years yet, up over 25%, driven by a surge in tech stocks, AI momentum, and strong corporate earnings. By the end of year 5, my account balance was sitting at $118,000. Let me say that again. I put in $52,000 over 5 years, and the account was worth $118,000. I had more than doubled my money. That extra $66,000 wasn't from working overtime. It wasn't from a side hustle. It was from showing up every single week and letting the market do what it does best, reward patience. Now, here's where the retirement math gets interesting. Most financial advisors will tell you that you can safely withdraw about 4% per year from a portfolio without running out of money. That's called the 4% rule, and it's been tested across decades of market history. If I apply that rule to my $118,000 portfolio, that gives me about $4,620 per year in safe withdrawal income. That's not retirement money yet. But here's the thing. I'm not stopping. I'm still investing $200 every week, and now I have a 6-figure portfolio compounding on top of those contributions. The next 5 years won't look like the first 5. They'll look much bigger. Let's project forward. If I keep contributing $200 per week for another 5 years, that's another $52,000 in contributions. But now I'm starting with $118,000, not zero. Assuming QQQ continues to average around 15% per year, which is conservative compared to its historical performance, my portfolio in year 10 would be worth roughly $380,000. That's not a guess. That's basic compound growth math. At that point, a 4% withdrawal rate gives me $15,200 per year, or about $1,267 per month in passive income. And if I keep going for 15 years total, contributing the same $200 per week, the portfolio could reach $900,000. At that level, I'd be pulling $36,000 per year, or $3,000 per month, without touching the principal. But here's the part that blew my mind. When I ran the numbers on my original retirement plan, the one I had before I started investing, I was looking at working until 65. That gave me about 30 years to save, and I was relying mostly on a 401k with modest contributions and employer match. The projections showed I'd have enough to retire comfortably, but not early. Now, with this QQQ strategy, I'm on track to hit my retirement number by 55. That's 10 years early, 10 extra years of freedom, health, and time, and all because I committed to $200 per week. Let me break down why QQQ specifically made this possible. Because the fund choice matters just as much as the consistency. QQQ tracks the NASDAQ 100, which means it holds the 100 largest non-financial companies listed on the NASDAQ exchange. It's heavily weighted toward technology, but it also includes consumer services, healthcare, and industrials. The top 10 holdings make up about 50% of the fund, and those names are Apple, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Amazon, Meta, Broadcom, Tesla, Alphabet, and Costco. These aren't startups. These are trillion-dollar companies with global reach, recurring revenue, and pricing power. When you invest in QQQ, you're not betting on a single trend. You're betting on the companies that define modern life. The performance history backs that up. Over the past 10 years, QQQ returned an average of 18.6% per year. Over 15 years, it's averaged 17.3%. Over 20 years, 14.9%. Even during periods that included the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial crisis, and the COVID pandemic, QQQ recovered and went on to make new highs. That's the power of investing in quality businesses with strong fundamentals. They stumble, they adapt, and they grow. And as a shareholder, you get to ride that growth without doing any of the work. Another key factor is the low expense ratio. QQQ charges just 0.2% per year in management fees. That's $20 for every $10,000 invested. Compare that to actively managed funds that charge 1% or more, and the difference compounds dramatically over time. Lower fees mean more of your money stays invested and working for you. Over 5 years, that small difference can add up to thousands of dollars in extra growth. And over decades, it can mean the difference between a comfortable retirement and an early one. Now let's talk about the mistakes I made along the way, because I didn't do this perfectly. The first mistake was checking my account too often in the beginning. I'd look at it daily, sometimes multiple times a day, and every little dip would make me second-guess the strategy. I'd see the balance drop by $500 and wonder if I should pause contributions or switch to something safer. That emotional reaction is normal, but it's also dangerous. The more you check, the more you react. And the more you react, the more likely you are to make a decision that kills your long-term progress. I eventually limited myself to checking once a week, and even then, only to confirm the deposit went through. The second mistake was not increasing my contributions when I got raises. In year 2, I got a 5% salary bump. I kept investing $200 per week, which was fine, but I could have easily increased it to $225 or $250 without feeling the difference. I didn't, and looking back, that missed opportunity probably cost me an extra $10,000 or more in portfolio growth. The lesson is simple. When your income grows, your investments should grow with it. Lifestyle inflation is real, but investment inflation should be automatic. The third mistake was not having a clear exit strategy. I knew I wanted to retire early, but I didn't define what that actually meant. How much income did I need? What would I do with my time? What did early retirement look like day to day? Without that clarity, I was just chasing a number. Once I sat down and mapped out my actual expenses, my desired lifestyle, and my timeline, the goal became real. I wasn't just investing to invest. I was investing toward a specific life, and that made it easier to stay consistent, even when the market got choppy. Let's talk about sequence of returns risk, because this is something most people don't think about until it's too late. Sequence of returns refers to the order in which your investment gains and losses happen. If you experience big losses early in your retirement, when you're pulling money out, it can permanently damage your portfolio's ability to recover. But if you experience big gains early, it gives you a cushion that can last for decades. The reason this matters for my strategy is that I'm front-loading my contributions during my working years, which means I'm building the portfolio while I'm still adding money. That reduces sequence risk because I'm not relying on withdrawals yet. By the time I retire, the portfolio will be large enough and seasoned enough to handle normal market volatility without threatening my income. Another key element is tax efficiency, and this is something I didn't fully understand until year 3. I was investing in a taxable brokerage account, which meant I had to pay taxes on dividends and capital gains every year. QQQ pays a small dividend, around 0.5% yield, but it's still taxable. If I had started in a Roth IRA instead, all of that growth would have been tax-free. I eventually opened a Roth and started splitting my contributions, $200 per week into the taxable account, and anything extra into the Roth. That way, I'm building tax-free retirement income while still maintaining flexibility in the taxable account for earlier access if needed. Let's dig into what retiring 10 years early actually means in practical terms. It's not just about the money, it's about time, health, and freedom. Most people retire in their mid-60s, and by that point, health issues start to creep in. Energy levels drop. Travel becomes harder. The things you wanted to do in your 30s and 40s feel less appealing or less possible. Retiring at 55 instead of 65 gives you a full decade of active, healthy years to do whatever you want. You can travel without worrying about vacation days. You can start a passion project without needing it to make money. You can spend time with family without feeling guilty about missing work. That decade is priceless, and it's only possible because of the financial foundation you build now. But early retirement doesn't mean stopping all income. It just means you're no longer dependent on a paycheck. In my case, I plan to keep doing work I enjoy, but on my own terms. Consulting, freelancing, maybe teaching. The difference is that I'll be choosing projects based on interest, not necessity. And because my portfolio will be generating passive income, I won't need to earn much to cover my lifestyle. That's the real definition of financial independence. Work becomes optional, not mandatory. Now let's address the elephant in the room. What if the market crashes right before I retire? What if QQQ drops 30% or 40% in year 9 or year 10? This is the question that keeps people from investing in the first place, and it's a valid concern. The answer is twofold. First, I'm not going to retire the day I hit my number. I'll have a transition period where I build up a cash cushion, maybe 1 to 2 years of living expenses, so I'm not forced to sell during a downturn. Second, I'm not retiring and immediately withdrawing everything. The portfolio will keep working, and I'll only pull what I need. If the market drops, I'll pull less, or rely on the cash cushion until it recovers. The key is flexibility. Early retirement doesn't mean rigid withdrawal rates. It means having enough runway to adapt. Let's talk about the power of weekly investing versus monthly or lump sum. A lot of people assume that investing monthly or making one big deposit at the end of the year is more efficient. And mathematically, if you invest a lump sum at the beginning of the year, you'll usually end up with more because that money has more time in the market. But here's the problem. Most people don't have a lump sum sitting around. They have a paycheck that comes in regularly, and by the time the end of the year rolls around, the money's already spent. Weekly investing works because it removes the decision. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to time it. You just do it every single week, like clockwork. And that behavioral edge, that automation, is what makes it so effective in the real world. There's also something called dollar cost averaging, and it's one of the biggest advantages of weekly investing. When you invest the same amount every week, you automatically buy more shares when prices are low and fewer shares when prices are high. You're not trying to time the market, you're letting the market's natural ups and downs work in your favor. Over 5 years, that meant I bought QQQ at $250, at $300, at $350, and everywhere in between. I didn't have to guess when to buy. I just bought constantly, and the average cost smoothed out over time. That's how you remove emotion and let math do the heavy lifting. One of the most surprising parts of this journey was how my relationship with money changed. Before I started investing, I thought about money in terms of what I could buy: a new car, a vacation, a bigger apartment. But once I started building the portfolio, I started thinking about money in terms of what it could become. Every $200 I invested wasn't just $200. It was $200 that could turn into $400, then $800, then $1,600 over time. That shift in perspective made it easier to say no to short-term spending. I wasn't depriving myself, I was choosing future freedom over present consumption. And once you see money that way, the decisions get easier. Let me show you what the next 5 years could look like if I keep going. Right now, I'm at $118,000 after 5 years. If I keep investing $200 per week and QQQ averages 15% per year, here's the projection. Year 6, portfolio grows to about $155,000. Year 7, $198,000. Year 8, $248,000. Year 9, $307,000. Year 10, $377,000. At that point, I've contributed $104,000 total over 10 years, but the portfolio is worth nearly 4 times that. The compound effect is fully engaged, and the growth is happening faster than I can contribute. That's the inflection point where investing stops feeling like a grind and starts feeling like momentum. But let's go even further. What if I keep going for 15 years total? Same $200 per week, same 15% average return. By year 15, the portfolio would be worth around $920,000. I'd have contributed $156,000, and the market would have added $764,000 on top of that. At that level, a 4% withdrawal rate gives me $36,800 per year, or just over $3,000 per month. That's not just early retirement money. That's live anywhere, do anything, never worry about bills again money. And it all started with $200 per week. Now, I want to address a common objection. What if you can't afford $200 per week? What if you can only do $50 or $100? Here's the truth. The amount matters less than the habit. If you invest $50 per week for 5 years into QQQ, assuming the same 15% return, you'd end up with about $20,500. You'd have contributed $13,000, and the market would have added $16,500. That's still more than doubling your money. And if you keep going for 10 years, that $50 per week turns into $94,000. For 15 years, it becomes $230,000. The principle is the same. Consistency and time create wealth. The amount just adjusts the timeline. Let's talk about the psychological side of early retirement, because hitting the number is only half the battle. The other half is actually walking away from your job when you're used to the structure, the identity, and the paycheck. A lot of people get to their retirement number and then keep working because they're scared. Scared of running out of money, scared of losing purpose, scared of what comes next. I've thought about this a lot, and my plan is to transition gradually. I'll start by going part-time, then freelance, then fully step back. That way, I'm easing into the lifestyle instead of jumping off a cliff. And because I'll have passive income from the portfolio, I'll have the financial cushion to make that transition on my terms. Another important factor is lifestyle design. Early retirement doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing what you want, when you want. For me, that's travel, writing, spending time with family, and working on projects that interest me without deadlines or pressure. I've started planning what that looks like, where I want to live, how I want to spend my days, what hobbies I want to dive into. Having that vision makes the investing process feel purposeful. I'm not just saving money, I'm building the life I actually want to live. Let's also talk about inflation, because a lot of people worry that their retirement savings won't keep up with rising costs. And that's a legitimate concern. Over the past few years, inflation has been higher than usual, and the cost of food, housing, and healthcare has climbed significantly. But here's the thing. When you invest in companies, you're investing in businesses that can raise prices. Apple can charge more for iPhones, Amazon can adjust Prime membership fees, Microsoft can increase subscription costs. These companies have pricing power, which means their revenues and earnings can grow with inflation, and as a shareholder, you benefit from that. Your portfolio grows in real terms, not just nominal terms. That's the advantage of owning equities instead of holding cash or bonds. One of the most powerful lessons I learned is that investing isn't about being smart. It's about being consistent. I didn't pick QQQ because I'm a financial genius. I picked it because it made sense and I stuck with it. I didn't try to time the market. I didn't panic during downturns. I didn't chase the next hot stock. I just kept investing $200 every single week, no matter what. And that boring, repetitive discipline is what built the portfolio. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's that you don't need to be an expert. You just need to start, stay consistent, and let time do the rest. Let's also talk about what happens if you need the money before retirement. Life happens. Emergencies come up. Maybe you lose your job, or you have a medical expense, or you need to help a family member. One of the benefits of investing in a taxable brokerage account is that you can access the money anytime without penalties. There's no age restriction like there is with a 401k or IRA. You'll pay taxes on any gains, but the money is liquid. That flexibility is valuable, and it's one reason I didn't put everything into retirement accounts. I wanted the option to access the funds if I needed them, even if it meant paying some taxes along the way. Now let's talk about what comes after 5 years. Because the journey doesn't stop here. I'm going to keep investing $200 per week. I'm going to keep letting the portfolio compound. and I'm going to keep documenting the process so you can see what's possible. The next 5 years will be even bigger than the first 5 because the base is larger, the compounding is stronger, and the momentum is real. And if you're just starting or if you're a year or two in, just know that the early years are the hardest. They don't look impressive, they don't feel rewarding, but they're building the foundation that makes everything else possible. If you're still on the fence about whether this is worth it, let me put it in perspective. 5 years ago, I was exactly where you are now. I was skeptical, I was worried about market crashes, I didn't know if $200 per week would actually matter, but I started anyway. And now I'm looking at a 6-figure portfolio and a path to retiring 10 years early. The only difference between where I was and where I am now is that I started. I didn't wait for the perfect time. I didn't wait until I had more money. I just started and I kept going. And if I can do it, so can you.